You want to start or scale your property development business to 8 figures and beyond? Then you're in the right place. This is the Property Experts Podcast with Ben Richards and Jack Diggins, two serial entrepreneurs bringing weekly insights from our award-winning businesses. In these podcasts, you'll learn how we found, funded and delivered over £80 million worth of property in the last 6 years, with templates you can use, deal analysis and deep dive discussions that will help you build your businesses successfully. We hope you'll enjoy.
Hello everyone, welcome, happy Friday. If you've joined us before, thanks very much for coming back. Hopefully we're giving good value. We've got a really special episode today with lots of nuggets on how you can grow and scale your business. If you haven't joined us before, make sure you watch through and see the true value that we offer to share what we do in our businesses week in, week out, and religiously every Friday. I think we've only missed a few in 3 years. Come on and share value. Our goals is to deliver 1,000 homes and £1 billion worth of property. And we do that with investors, which kind of brings us on to, we're open for discussions with potential investors. So if you are interested in hearing how you can get involved in property investment, please do reach out. We'd love a conversation. That you could just have an initial conversation and see where we get from there. Without further ado, we'll jump into the session and tell you guys what we're going to be talking through in today's episode. So it's the 1st of August for podcast listeners, and we're going to kick off the session with a massive, what I would call de-risking part of the process, which is understanding comparable resales. And we've actually, off the back of our own learnings, I've built an acid test, which Ben hasn't seen before. So I'm keen to share it with Ben and see what he thinks. But we've come to learn that you can't rely on third-party resources to really dial down onto those exit values, because it's one of the most important figures on a spreadsheet to get it going and get deals over the line. We're then going to be talking about more of the construction costs, so finishes as a percentage on costs. We'll be talking about our scheme in North London, which is our current only scheme in London, which is Colney Hatch Lane, and we'll be sharing where we're at. We'll be talking about news at Thame, which is our mixed-use development, our largest deal that we're doing today, and we'll be sharing an update on that. We'll be talking about XP Surveys' event that we carry out, which is pretty much once a quarter, always sells out. I was actually absent, as I was last week, so Ben was holding the fort. I did tune in, but we'll be talking about how that event went, and we'll be talking about planning process. Yada, yada, yada. If you don't know what it is, stay part of that to see what it is. HVT and LVT, I'm not referring to laminated vinyl tiles. I'm talking about tasks, and I'll be helping you buy yourselves more time per week, which is the most important thing, because time is the only commodity that we're running out of. I'll be talking about intercompany loans and balance sheets. Just if you've got a lot going on and you're tracking payments, hopefully that will come in useful for you. We'll be sharing some sales process at Marlow. I've heard a lot of doom and gloom in the market. So we'll be seeing if we are part of that doom and gloom. And then last but not least, before Q&A, is did we win the appeal, and how does an appeal work? There we go. Welcome, Ben.
Good stuff. Hello, everyone. So show me your acid test.
So this actually came off the back of Ben and I have been bidding / pushing forward a couple of sites, this year really, quite large sites. And when you lose larger deals, it's more painful because it's more time spent on these sites, there's more costs spent on these sites, and it hurts more. If you're trying to buy a house and it doesn't go through, the void that's left is a lot smaller and a lot more manageable. But when you do bigger deals, it's a lot more difficult. And essentially, I always try and look at the projects and go, what could we learn from this? And that's, interestingly, I was chatting to a mentee this week. And sometimes in the process of going to bid on a site and missing out on a site, you forget what you learn getting to the point of missing out on it. So don't beat yourself up that you haven't secured a site, but take away the takeaways that you've delivered. So how you've learned to analyze that project, and then also how you've learned to carry that forward to be quicker, faster, more robust. And this is exactly that last point. So to be more robust. Now, our comparable process and proving a gross development value has always been down the line of the process of we look at a site, we try and determine the exit value. that will typically be quite loosely formed in the company. So if we're worried about the exit values, we'll go far and wide and speak to multiple agents, speak to valuers, do whatever we need to do to get comfort with that. But our own comfort might not necessarily be the comfort for other parties. I'm talking about investor, the bank, or even partners that are joining on board that scheme. And so we kind of almost had quite an elastic process that if we were looking at a deal that we were concerned about exit values, we'd spend more time on it. And if we're looking at deals that we were less concerned, we'd spend less time on them. There are certain areas that we operate now, and I don't even need to do comparables in some regions. There's others that I don't have a clue. I don't have a finger on the pulse in the market, and agents are a good place to go to. So off the back of getting through the process of these deals, we came to realize that, well, I came to realize that we weren't hot enough on our GDV valuations. So I was like, how can we, going forward from here, try and eliminate that risk going forward? So I built what I would call a comps acid test. Acid is just like a catchy word, and it might have brought you here today. But essentially, it's a process, a 7-step process to ensure that a deal that you're bidding on and taking through the legal process has been pre-qualified as best you can at the exit. And I've said before on these calls that the GDV is almost the important figure on the sheet, because if you're 5% out, it swings the deal more out because it's the largest figure on the sheet. So what I mean by that is, if your build cost is 500k and your GDV is £1 million and you're 10% off each, the bigger impact is on the GDV. If you're 10% out, you're 100k loss. If you're 10% out on the build, you're a 50k loss. So because it's the biggest figure on the sheet, it needs the most attention to detail. It needs the most diligence around analyzing those figures. And we can get lazy, and we've been victim of this, of just looking at search land, property data, maybe even relying on an agent's valuation, but it all comes down to your actual homework that you've done. And that comes in tenfold when an agent's giving you advice. You can't then just pass that on to an investor. You need to do your own homework, because the problem might be the investor might ask you a question of how have you got to that valuation? Why is it like that? And that process enables you to have to understand that you need to understand the sort of blood, the thick blood of that scheme. So for listeners, I'll try and walk through the 7-step process. For people watching on video, it's actually in front of you. So the first stage, I would pull a blended pound per square foot just to get the spreadsheet going. So I call that get the stack going. So you might go on property data, search land, land insight, Nimbus maps, whatever it may be, and you pull a blended pound per square foot for that area. Typically, we're talking about residential development schemes. The spread you will have is you might have 1-bed, 2-bed, 3-bed flats, and you might have 2-bed, 3-bed, 4-bed, 5-bed houses, and the pound per square foot is massively going to change. So the only purpose of that is just to get the spreadsheet sort of going, get the inertia out of the way, get a figure in there so you can start playing around with the figures. And that is why we start with a blended pound per square foot. The reason we start with a blended pound per square foot is it could be 30% out, so 15% up, 15% down. But what this enables us to do is if it's that out, so 30% buffer, and we're looking at the purchase price and the build cost and the exit value, and the deal still doesn't work, even if you're potentially 30% out, then the first thing you need to do is analyze that your time is the most important thing, and can that deal? So the blended pound per square foot is get the spreadsheet going and to either yes or no that scheme really broadly. Once you get past that point, I would then recommend you do a full report on the tech platform that you're on and start to look at the actual alike properties. So we've got on here, deals look like a starter. So you're confident that there potentially is margin in the scheme. And then you might look on Searchland and Agent Rightmove report, which is quite a common thing that an agent might produce. So we haven't spent much time on this yet. So we still blended average on point 1, tech report on point 2. And you haven't spent time on earth, because the biggest issue with comparables is you could spend days on it if you really wanted to, but you're trying to ensure that you're spending efficient time yourself, because that time on that deal might be time not on another deal. So you want to make sure that you're really prioritizing your time. Then let's just assume the stack starts to look okay and you think you might have a deal here. Obviously, if you haven't, you'd go back to the agent, feedback, you think it's overpriced, ask them how they got to that valuation. But let's just assume the deal is looking pretty positive. Then at that point, so stage number 3, I would actually personally go through Rightmove and look at sold properties that are like in the area and try and find comparables. If you're in a really populated area, you might be able to find comparables within the last sort of year. Rightmove doesn't register sales that quickly, so typically valuations like to look at the last sort of 3 to 6 months in sales. If you're on Rightmove, you might have to look a bit further back than that, like 6 to 9 months or 9 to 12 months. But at least you're looking at comparable stock. When you're doing that as a human, you can actually then start to look at, well, this one's got a smaller garden, that one's got a nice, that one's got parking, and start to get and build a flavor and exposure of that deal and what it will come into value at. Sometimes on deals, if there's enough headroom and we're confident with it, we'll bid on that. We'll bid at that stage. So stage 3 is sometimes consequently enough to get a bid forward, get the deal done, and start going forward in legals. Most of the time with bigger developments, we then need more data, more information, more opinions, because we've got to instruct a valuation. We've got to bring an investor on board. So to get enough comprehensive research, sometimes looking at 3 comparables on Rightmove isn't enough to secure those other parties that need to come on board. Quite rightly so. If I was an investor, I would want to see more than just some rooting around on Rightmove. So at that stage, so stage 4, so stage 1, blended pound per square foot. Stage 2, tech report. Stage 3, Rightmove sold properties. Stage 3 is I would go to 3 local agents. Now, the 3 local agents have probably their fingertips in the Rightmove sold and potentially also the tech report and also the blended report, but they've lived and breathed that market. If you get someone that hasn't lived and breathed that market, will they potentially give you the best valuation? I'd probably argue not, because at this point, when you're going to those 3 agent valuations, you're looking for local knowledge, the gut of the market, the feel of the market, what is moving, what isn't moving, what's selling, like the boots on the ground. You want to ask their opinion and see what the reality is. So before, if you're not confident on bidding, I would then go to 3 agents before final bid using floor plans. And if you're comfortable using the site location, that way I feel you get a very dialed down, accurate valuation of the site. What I would say is agents are notorious for valuing things up because they want instructions. That's their job. They're salespeople. So make sure you position that as best you can. So say, look, I don't really care if you value this at £1 million or £1.2 million. That doesn't change my opinion of instructing you. I want you to value this as if we're selling these units. So that's stage 4. Typically, that's at the point where we'll get a bid forward. We've had sites like Thame before where we've gone to 3 agents and we're still none the wiser. So the next stage, which is stage 5, 3 more agents valuations. If you don't feel like you've got enough substance and comfort around those 3 agents, then actually sometimes 3 agents don't want to put the time together to share what they believe on the market on that particular scheme. We would then go to 3 more agents. Equally, if we've secured the site in legals, we would still go to 3 more agents. We're going to 6 agents if we can in this process, so that even pre-bid or post-bid, depending on how confident you are on the scheme, you've then got 6 agent valuations. You can really determine the values of the site. Point number 6 is that we then blend. We blend the 3 agents valuations. We blend our Rightmove valuations ourselves. So we've got 6 sources that are external and third party. We've got our own resource, which is internal, and we probably understand the scheme a little bit more. And then we blend those values. The reason we blend those is because you might have, to give you a prime example, when we went to market, having pretty much complete Marlow, our valuation spread post PC, so finishing the scheme, was like 20 something %. Now that's when we're finished. We're not even speculatively looking at what finishes we have, what planning we might get, what the market's going to be like in 2 years. So you will get a natural blend. And that is why we say blend those costs, because you need to try and de-risk it yourself. I also put on the screen there that we don't like to attach a new build premium, because that is potentially hope value. And that is the 6 stages to try and get a comprehensive valuation on a site. Last but not least, which is point 7, which is sharing. So you've got all of this data and you've got all this information, but you don't just cast this out to everyone and anyone that you feel may be relative to have this information. We send the higher valuations typically in the valuation pack, because we want to try and support the optimism and ensure that we get the best valuation possible. everyone's like, why do you want to get the best valuation possible? It's like, it's easier to deleverage something than to try and get a higher valuation on something. So always shoot for the best valuation you can get. We actually share the medium or mean with the investor, so the realistic values. We don't overshoot those, we don't undershoot those, but we just share what we think it's going to fall in at. And then if we need to renegotiate with the seller, we will share the lower valuation of those tiers. A bit of a hack there, that last point. So if you stayed with us till this point, that's a bit of a tip to, one, get better valuations, two, get investors on site, and three, chip/renegotiate if you need to, because we've often had it where the vendor's valuation is far amiss from what actual reality. We've actually sent a valuation today to a vendor, which is a red book valuation. So we haven't not shared anything else, but it's just reality. It's not where they think it is. They need their expectations readjusted, and that is that. So that's a 7-step process.
Nice. I like it. I only had one thing. I don't think you mentioned it, but like pound per square foot rates are one thing. But if you've got massive units, so you've got a one bed that's like 70 square meters, the pound per square foot rate for that one bed, if it's 70 square meters, is going to be very similar to a two bed. Now, the actual unit price or unit sales price of that two bed should be far greater than an oversized one bed. Yet if you were purely basing it on a pound per square foot rate, you're going to be overvaluing your larger units. That was my only only comment to that.
You really should also, with house building, it should be looking at pound per bed. That's a really good ratio to also look at. But hopefully, but to Ben's point, once you get to the step 3, so before you've bid, you should be looking at your own comparable one bed units that are similar size, larger size, that you can then go, actually, it's not 500 a square foot, it's actually 420 a square foot. Then you whether you think to redesign that or just looking through that process. I mean, this is exactly why we made the process, because blended pound per square foot is all well and good, but it only, it tells you postcodes can be 3 miles wide. So to get a pound per square foot on that postcode could be so inaccurate, because every location has a bad area, every location has a good area. You get some really good, well laid out one beds. You might get some really badly laid out two beds. It's definite work that you need to do. But completely agree.
Nice. That's solid advice straight out of the gate, which is good. We wanted to sort of touch on loosely around finishes. So when we generally price a scheme, we will often strip out the base build costs and also strip out the finishes. And what I mean by that is generally like client supply type items, things like your kitchens, your flooring, your tiling, your fixtures and fittings like your sockets, all of those things that make a massive impact on the final interior design and finishes, and you maybe want a little bit more control over, or you know what the pound per square foot rate of tiles you want to put in depending on the specification that you're going for, and it means you get closer control, I think, on your build costs, because your finishes are relatively fixed and they're not going to be subjective to a builder pricing things differently or not understanding the specification or what works are required. They're pretty standardized. So when you look at these finishes, you should be able to, on a lot of schemes, get a really good sense of where they should be, and that might be as a percentage on overall costs. So what I mean by that is, let's say you were taking a office conversion in one area, let's say in the home counties where we operate, where it's something like £500 a square foot resale value, versus, for example, our Colney Hatch Lane scheme in North London, Muswell Hill, where it's going to be more like £900 per square foot area. Now, our percentage of finishes on build costs in both those schemes, if they were an identical scheme, are going to be different. Whereas the base build cost probably won't change that much at all, because the cost of the building work is the cost of the building work. What will change, depending on the specification of the site, is the finishes. So let's say, for example, in an area where it is a low specification, low pound per square foot resale value area, like somewhere in the home counties where maybe it's £400 a square foot, you might only spend 15% of your total costs on the finishes on that scheme, whereas you might spend 25% of the total costs on the scheme in Muswell Hill because it's a higher spec. And sometimes I think this can get overlooked, where people maybe just plug in a standard cost for finishes, no matter where the location is or what specification you're going for. And Jack, I think you had some things to...
Yeah, completely agree. So we have our own spreadsheet, which is a standard spreadsheet, and whether it's in Central Suites and we're doing a flip, or whether it's in XP and we're doing a development, you can't leave 10 grand in for a kitchen on every scheme, because we've looked at schemes inside the M25 where someone might be buying a flat for £800,000. How do you think they're going to feel when they walk in and see a kitchen that's 10 grand, as opposed to someone walking into a development site in Oxfordshire buying a flat for 250 grand and it's the same kitchen? So the sort of percentage on cost, or even evaluating the product that you're delivering, can't just be, I've got my finish and I'll stick to that same finish. So you have to be very acute to like the market and what specification needs to be done and finished, because you're delivering to a different client. It's like, you know, I've been fortunate enough to fly in business class and first class, and one of the crazy things that you get, but you don't realize that you get it, is everything's in glasses. Whereas when you go back to economy, you realize everything's in plastic, but you don't realize when you're in economy that they get glasses, and you don't realize that you've got glasses when you're in first class. But then when you go back, you do. And that's exactly what buyers are doing. If they're moving from a 500 grand flat into something new, they're going to expect something different. They don't want the same kitchen that they had in their last place. If they're spending double the money, they want something that's equivalent of what they're spending and the value that they're trying to generate in terms of feel and touch and product. And that really, as Ben said, whether we do Colney Hatch Lane in London or whether we do our scheme in Thame, the plasterboard is the same. It's the same material. The plaster is the same material, but the finishes are what make the huge difference in price point, finish, and actually gets that premium when it comes to be selling. So just a note, just think, what are you delivering at this moment in time? What specification are you putting in there? It doesn't, you know, you don't necessarily need an interior designer, so to speak, to help you understand that if it's a more valuable asset at the end, you need to have more valuable things in it as a finish. Obviously the design is another thing. You might want an interior designer, but yeah, that was the kind of main key point just to take away from that.
Yeah, I mean, on interior designers, Aura does have some exciting news coming soon. Actually, we're currently packaging it up, but ultimately, from a developer perspective, Aura and the interior side of Aura is going to be bringing forward a property marketing package where, you know, we will help you brand your site. We will help you do the market analysis of what your target audience should be for your development, help you create the design specification from an interiors perspective, package up, you know, these lovely images and mood boards that you see on screen, which was actually done by Aura, and help you all the way through to creating sales brochures and micro websites and things like that. So it's an offering that I've been wanting to do for a while. You know, we work with a number of developers. We've obviously done it for XP for many years. So we want to bring it to other people, and yeah, watch this space, because I'm excited about bringing that forward. On to Muswell Hill, which is what those images were from on the previous page. And this is quite a visual couple of slides for those listening on the audio. Obviously, you know, get over to YouTube if you want to start looking at some of this stuff, because what we talk about generally is quite visual because it's property. But if you do listen on Spotify, and I still think it is on Apple actually, whereby we have started uploading the video version of the podcast to the audio platforms. So you should find that even though you might be listening to an audio, if you do open the Spotify platform on your phone, it should pop up with the video of this as well, so you can see the things that we're talking about, which is super cool. So this is it as of, when was I there? Yesterday. Scaffolding's up at the front. The roof work's now completely finished and watertight. You know, Velux windows are in, and all of the roof works to support the chimney are in. The bay windows, the bay extensions at the front, you can see are in, and the big crucial thing that are showing on this these images are basically that the massive sash windows are 95% in. There's only literally, I think, 2 on site that weren't done by the time I left. And they look fantastic. So they are timber sash windows. They're massive, some of these windows. But they look absolutely great, and looking forward to kind of seeing that all come together when it's fully finished and the scaffolding comes down and the front elevation is all cleaned up, because it is just going to look absolutely awesome. The only thing that doesn't make this property now watertight are the ground floor aluminium sliding doors to the ground two flats, because they were just slightly longer lead time and took a little bit longer to measure up and get into production. But that is happening on Monday. So as of Tuesday next week, we will have a watertight shell, which is, long time coming. It hasn't held them up on the top 2 floors. So this is an image of the first floor kitchen, dining, living space where I'm standing from taking this photo. But the first floor is fully plastered and mist coated. And the kitchens will start installation next Monday as well. So busy day on Monday, final doors going in, kitchen starting to arrive, and the tiling of the bathrooms will start shortly thereafter. We've had the electrical supplies and meters installed under the stairs, which is cool. That's often the thing that holds us up on some sites, especially with Thames Water, as you'll probably know if you tune in quite regularly. But yeah, all of the electrics are in. The basement is looking tip top. So only probably a month ago was it a sort of concrete shell. They've really cracked on with that now. The insulation and screeds on the ground floor, the stud wall to the perimeter walls are in, and the partitioning of all of the bedrooms, bathrooms, storerooms, etc. down there are also in, ready for installation and plasterboard. So start to see the space now, which is great. The bedrooms down there are massive. Every time I go down there, I'm still pissed off that the planners wanted us to go towards providing an additional 3-bed family unit on this site, when the ground floor and basement level at the front of this property would have been absolutely ideal to have 2 split level 2-bed duplexes. But what we've ended up is with a 3-bed duplex and a 1-bed oversized duplex. So bit pissed off, because it definitely hits our GDV significantly, but the council wanted at least 2 3-beds on the site. So we've got the penthouse and this one split level. So yeah, still annoyed by that, but ultimately here we are. And that is the state of the penthouse. So the guys were up there on their stilts, plastering ceilings and plastering walls. This is the master bedroom. As you come in, you've got the ensuite on the left hand side, and then a walk-in wardrobe section on the right. By the close of play today, all of the loft penthouse will be fully plastered, and then by the end of next week we will have the mist coat on up there as well, and the kitchen is arriving Monday as well, so that will start going in. So yeah, really cracking on. And just as a reminder, this is where we're headed with this scheme. This is the front elevation, this is the rear elevation. Everything on the top 2 floors is in, and then this ground floor is where we're just waiting for these sliding doors and these fixed panels to go in on Monday as well. So yeah, it's going to look incredible, and it's almost there now. We've got a finish date of full PC'd mid-October, so only about sort of 10 weeks to go until it's fully finished now.
Looking good.
Yeah, it's looking sharp, really sharp. To the other side of the coin, in terms of just starting, the big news coming out of Thame at the moment is that we got access to Unit 1. Our housing association tenant has moved into their new office. We finally got the building control certificate signed off, and we have now started strip out. And by say started, actually it's now finished. So these photos are slightly old now, even now. The video that came through today from the builders, all of these walls have been stripped out, all of the radiators, all of the ceilings here have been stripped out. So literally everything, ground floor, first floor and second floor now, is a bare canvas for us to go in and start putting things together. And really the important thing about what's happening next, and you can actually see the guy in this photo, I didn't realize, but he's you can see him sort of basically bashing a hole through this wall. That may look quite boring for loads of people, but it's probably the most exciting thing I've seen in the last 6 months, because what that's doing is knocking through to the stairwell of our phase 1. So we're knocking phase 1 and phase 2 together. The builders will create a fire 60-minute fire lobby to allow us access up to the top floor via phase 1 and sell the top floor flat of phase 1, which is already exchanged. So basically creating a new fire lobby, creating a new stair core that we can get signed off from building control. And it means that there are 2 flats within phase 1 that we can't sell until that work's done. So yeah, that unlocks a lot of value for us. We've already exchanged on the top floor flat. So as soon as that fire corridor is installed, we can serve notice, 10-day notice, get that completed and get £250,000 back to pay down some debt. So yeah, big moments. Yeah, this stage I really like because, you start to open things up. You start to see how the design works with some spaces that you might not have been able to see previously. It's an opportunity to get the structural engineer back on site, check that his assumptions are accurate. We were looking at these beams actually on site and thinking his original assumptions were that we would need to install new beams here, but we've asked the question, there's already steel beams there. Can we strengthen them? Are they adequate currently to take the weight and do the job of the steel that you originally proposed? And these are questions now that we can answer and get some good advice in terms of value engineering or savings or whatever may come of it. So yeah, super excited to see that one progress. If you like discussing this type of property development, if you want to grow, start or scale your property development into the tail end of 2025 and 2026, we get together every month with about 10 other people. Jack and I host the session. It's an opportunity to share opportunities that you're looking at with deal analysis, look at goals and achievements over the previous month and what you've got coming ahead in the further month. Leads, needs and intros. So if there's anything you're really struggling with, I guarantee there's somebody in the room or somebody that we can connect you with. And for a very small fee every month, you can get together for 4 hours with people out there like us doing good deals, trying to make their way through the property development space, learning from each other and growing each other's businesses together. On a more one-to-one intimate sort of mentorship perspective, we have various packages available if people want to just touch base for individual problems that they've got. I did an hour session with Harry, who's got some exciting land deals coming up, got some issues with his lender, wanted to run through a couple of scenarios in terms of how it might play out or things that I've seen before in terms of our own schemes. It's the people we speak to on these consultancy calls get huge amounts of value from our previous experience, and it helps them save money, add value, and ultimately not make some of the mistakes that we've made previously. So yeah, if you're struggling with certain very specific issues within your development or business life cycle, then yeah, reach out and we'd love to help you through them. Cool. So the Build and Bond event is something that XP Surveys has been hosting now for probably 2 years. It's a change of venue this time round. It was in the Hart Street Tavern on the one of the high streets in Henley-on-Thames. Great venue, actually, really good food, good drink, good company, and good speakers. We had Alex Richards from Planning Insight, no relation to me, but equally as good looking. And he talked about some of the key planning reform things that are coming through over the next year. I wanted to run through a couple of those, not going to go through his whole presentation. You'd have to turn up to the next one and find out more. But ultimately, there were some really key things that he spoke about. And we all know planning is up shit's creek without a paddle. There's a lot of work to do for the industry, top down from the government. And realistically, I think the people that are hit the hardest with the planning process at the moment are SME developers like us. Some of the key issues that Alex talked about is effectively a £362 million shortfall in terms of the funding to planning departments. We all know that the resources available are few and far between. The planning fees that we pay to the council are not ring-fenced at all for the planning department. They are pissed away wherever the government and council see fit, which is, I think, ludicrous. He's mentioned that there are inconsistent policies across all of the authorities. So the government are looking at ways in which they can standardize some of the approaches to solutions. And And unpredictable committee decisions is the thing that gets me the most. If we can shake up the committee process, I think that's going to be a massive, massive thing for the planning process. So what's coming in? We've got the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act from 2023, parts of that are being enacted. But the newest thing is the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which is currently being put before Parliament for a series of consultations. I think the biggest sort of shake-up for a long, long time with the way that planning is processed, the way it's viewed, the resources associated to it. And some of the key major changes that you touched on is the local fee setting. So I mentioned kind of fees not being ring-fenced for local planning departments. Local councils may be given the right to set their own fees based on their own profit and loss and operations within the council, which I think is great. I am all for increasing application fees, and it's not often you say that you're sort of okay with things costing more, because we all know development has got out of hand in terms of how much things cost over the last couple of years. But this is one area whereby, if the fees are proportionate to the time needed and the resource needed to deliver on the statutory deadlines, then I'd pay triple what they are at the moment to ensure that we get decisions in the 8-week time frame that it's due, instead of it being 16 weeks or half a year or 8 months, which you're getting at the moment. So, right fees, right project, right area, right service, I think is the key thing. And I think that's a great thing to bring in. They're looking at a national development management policy. So I know we've got the NPPF, which is the National Planning Policy Framework, that obviously governs a lot of the planning laws. But the ND, the what they call LURB, the National Development Management Policies, are more of a standardized approach to certain things, which is great. There's obviously local plans that need to be brought in, because each area is different. It does have a different set of requirements in terms of the people that live there, how they operate it. A village in South Oxfordshire is going to be different from a suburb of South London, for example. So they will have to have local policies that are relatable to the area, but national development management policies is more about standardizing some of those things. And I mentioned the planning committee overhaul. Let's see what else we can touch on. Yeah, so the NDMPs is about consistency, having common rules for standard issues and streamlining local plans. Consultation likely to be October, November this year. What else have we got? There's also talk about reviewing BNG, which is, that's obviously a huge thing. I think BNG for all small developers is just ridiculous. So they're looking at bringing in exemptions for smaller projects, which is great. So having a basically a small, where you've got, for social housing or affordable housing, anything above 10 units is often kind of deemed as a major application. Everything less than that is a minor application. There's now talks around changing how that BNG requirement is for small development. So there's talk around removing BNG requirements for all minor developments, which would be massive for us. The amount of stupid ideas that I've seen from 2-unit schemes where they're carving off 30% of the rear gardens to put it onto a 30-year management plan for biodiversity that no one's going to want to manage or use is, it's just ridiculous. Some of the things I've heard just to provide the BNG requirements that are due at the moment. And then, this is actually, I think, a massive thing. Obviously, I've just mentioned the minor and the major. Anything up to 10 homes is minor. Now, I've designed schemes in the past where I know I can get 12 units on site, but I've only designed 9 because if I go to 12, the site's unfeasible, which doesn't make any sense. But when you throw in affordable housing above 10, the affordable housing contribution means that the site becomes unviable because 35% of the units have zero value to you because they have to be affordable. So as soon as you go to that 10th unit, the site doesn't work. So you stick to 9, whereas you could get an extra 3 homes that contribute to the 1.5 million homes that the government are trying to achieve by shaking things up. So they're looking at reforming kind of how that works, having a minor residential development size up to 10 units, a new category of medium residential development between 10 and 49 homes, and then having a keeping the larger major residential development for 50 homes plus. So I think this is great. It's acknowledging, I think, that the SME market is dying, and it needs to be brought back to life and stimulated, not just continually shat on. And yeah, these things I think are a great way forward for that. So hopefully there's some key takeaways that you can give you a bit of a glimmer of hope for the planning process and making lives easier for SME developers. I certainly hope so anyway. Cool. Speaking of like young developers and people that want to get into the development space, Yada is the Young Architects and Developers Alliance. It's something that we've sponsored as XP Surveys in the past. So they hold events every year, typically like 3 or 4 events. It's full of budding, aspiring architects, and probably 20% developers, 80% architects, all in a room. This was actually me at like a speed networking for architects and developers, which was really good fun. Had lots of conversations with young aspiring architects that say they want to be developers, don't quite think they understand the risks associated or the problems and the issues that arise through it. But from their perspective, it's a great way of having control on the design, being your own client. And, I can understand why architects would like to become developers, because ultimately I think that they think there's a shitload of money to be made, and developers are the ones that make all the money in the process. Whereas in reality, it's the bank.
I would say an architect probably has a better shout than someone else, though.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely set up to succeed, aren't they? But most of the time, they're so creative and so design focused that they don't have the commercial awareness of what's required for a development. And that's actually why Martin set it up. So Martin Evans, he actually now works for Landsec. So his development business was bought out by Landsec, which is the largest commercial landlord in the UK. I had a really good conversation with him this week around Yada, why he set it up back in 2016. And ultimately, he was working with lots of architects. He's a developer himself from an architectural background. He just recognized the disconnect between what I've just said in terms of the architect being very creative, not necessarily understanding from a developer's point of view how it all works, the commerciality of it, why you still have to have some sense of understanding of build costs and how things are put together to combine architecture into development and make decent margins because you understand both parties. So yeah, the whole reason of bringing this up is to raise awareness for it. If you are a young architect and you're listening to this, get involved. They host events basically in fantastic architectural locations, generally around London. So some massive, big architectural practices, their studios, their offices, or big developer locations where the works are ongoing. They've got an open space for an office that's about to be fitted out, yet they basically host an event for pizzas and beers for people to have networking and speak to each other and share ideas. So if you are a young architect, if you are a young developer, check it out, because last time I went there was 400 people in the room. You could barely hear yourself talk. It was so busy. Met some fantastic contacts, met some really interesting people. And unfortunately, I think the age limit is 30, although I snuck in first time round. But the thing that we're looking to do is help them host and sponsor their next event as XP Surveys. So obviously with XP Surveys, we want to get to our avatar client as fast as possible. If you've got a room of 400 architects, 400 developers, and we are sponsoring the event, that's great exposure for us. And I think a great place to support, something I'm really passionate about anyway. So yeah, watch this space for the autumn Yada event, sponsored by XP Surveys. We're looking for one extra sponsor as well. So if you are listening to this, if you're a supplier within the industry, we're looking for one other sponsor to come on board to make the cost less painful. But ultimately, it's a great event. It's full of our avatar client, and we are looking forward to sponsoring it.
Lovely. HVT, LVT. I was going to try and make a joke about HVT and LVT. I've got laminated vinyl tile, but
I honestly thought that was what you, when you typed this title, I was like, laminate vinyl tile, high vinyl tile, hard vinyl tile. Yeah,
vinyl tiling.
I didn't know where you were going to this with this until you put that.
It's so no surprise to anyone. Ben recorded the session last week, and I've been, not working my normal full work week. So I wanted to sort of retouch on a Daniel Priestley like Bible topic, which is high value tasks, low value tasks, and it's all about essentially, we're in the middle of summer. You may have things or not have things on, but if you've got family, you might be off for some holidays or whatever it may be. People might be away, and it's just to make you think about the things that you're doing day in, day out. And for a business owner and for someone that's running the business, the high value tasks are finding deals, finding money, creating new business. Strategy is like almost one of the most important things. When I talk about strategy, I'm thinking about recruitment, I'm thinking about growth, I'm thinking about goals, I'm thinking about changes, I'm thinking about cuts, I'm thinking about how you do things, I'm thinking about running through your financials. All of that stuff falls into strategy. That is all really, really, really high value tasks. If you're not spending a lot of time on high value tasks, you'll find that your business won't grow. And if you're spending a lot of time on low value tasks, you'll feel that you're always the one in the business doing the things. But where it became prevalent this last couple of weeks is obviously I haven't been at my desk, and I've been trying to just look at my desk, i.e. what I need to do, and just going like, what do I have to do today to push the business forward? And typically that's following up on a deal, speaking to an investor, getting back to people with a particular email that's really important for the level of things. And then I go through my mindset process of what could I not do? Is there a task I could just not do it? Like, have you ever looked at a task and gone, I could just not do it and see what happens? Equally, can you delegate? A really important one, which is relative to like high value task and low value task with delegation, is obviously if the hourly rate to delegate it is a lot less than your hourly rate, then you should be doing it anyway. But another one I wanted to touch on is looking at tasks where other people are doing a lot of things. So often property development is almost related to like being the forgotten his name now. Who's the person that stands at the front of an orchestra?
A composer.
Yeah. A property developer, you're essentially a composer of an orchestra. And for one flick of your time, like that's instructing someone to do something, they could be doing something for days on end, hours on end, weeks on end. So often with my task management, I look at, if I do this, they can then spend the time drawing on that or designing that or going and doing that task. So I often like to get those ones off my desk because it speeds up the whole process. If it takes someone 3 weeks to do something after you've spoken to them or given them a definitive answer, if you leave that into the last task, those 3 weeks are pushed on to the end of the time that you talk to them. So yeah, just to make you think about tasking in your profile. So what I love to do is my inbox is a good indicator of things that I need to do. So I have tasks in my inbox. So if an email comes through and I can just read it, I'll read it, and then it's an unread email. It's a read email. Unread emails are typically a task for me to do in my inbox. So I have an amount of tasks I need to do in my inbox. If it's ultra urgent, i.e. the 3 tasks a day, which if you are busy on holiday doing what you need to do, I'd highly recommend a 3 task a day workflow, so that you can, you've got things that you need to get to, and you'll get to them when you get to them. Because if I'm off for a few days, I'll probably have a good few hours in one of those 3 days where I can actually get shit done. But the day that I am off, there's 3 things that are probably going to be quite detrimental in keeping the business going forward. So focusing on those things in your inbox, also putting them in your calendar. I actually have a prioritization list in my calendar. So as I've been off for a few days and a few weeks, I've got a list of everything that's really urgent that I need to do, and I push everything that's most important to the top. So if I do the top one, I remove it, and then the next one goes up to the top. And that's a really good way to deal with like really high value tasks to deal with in your business and make sure they don't get neglected. There's obvious things that you need to do, like charge your car and tax your car or, drop something off. But I'm talking about the really important, getting a deal over the line, raising capital, going back to that vendor that wants to hear about you potentially buying that site, going back to a contractor that's renegotiating the cost of a contract, all that really high value stuff that you can't delegate or outsource, get it done and get moving on. And then actually delegate as much as you can, because sometimes I look in the things that I need to do and I think, and there's a great book, actually, I'd recommend buying it, which is Who Not How. I can't remember the author, but I've read it a few times. But when you look at your task list, you could actually think, who could do this, rather than can I do this? And actually, one thing that I always teach my mentees is sometimes just because a different company is not your business doesn't mean they can't do some admin for you. So if you're a little bit cheeky and you say, I don't really know how to do it, or I don't have time to do it, could you do that? Sometimes other businesses actually help you out and give you more of a service and do a little bit more admin for you. So don't be afraid to ask. But that's it. That's all I wanted to touch on.
Before Keyboard Warriors starts smashing in the comment box that it's not a composer, it's a conductor. There you go. I've corrected myself. As soon as I said it, I was like, that doesn't sound right. So I had to ask ChatGPT. But it's a conductor, not a composer.
I mean, we've really shown our IQ level there. Neither of us knew the answer to that question.
Exactly.
If that came up in a pub quiz.
It's late. It's been a long week.
Yeah,
it didn't sound right as soon as I said it.
Yeah.
Anyway, for those that want a better accounting system, Xero is we're plugging that again because there's a new offer. If you missed out on the previous one, it was 90% off for 6 months. Well, if you didn't get in there quick enough, you've now only got 50% off for 3 months, which is still a cracking offer. So get your link down below if you want to supercharge your financial management via a software platform called Xero. Cool. Intercompany loans and balance sheets.
Yes, this was actually my one. So XP, from what I've learned, is actually really good with bookkeeping, management accounts, P&Ls, and organizing our stuff. Central Suites hasn't been that great. We've moved from 3 different companies now to do our bookkeeping and essentially management accounts, which produces a balance sheet. And as Josh Keegan, who runs Ultimate FD, says, like, it's almost impossible to drive a vehicle without knowing what's going on underneath the bonnet. And we've really struggled in Central Suites to have, like, we're making money. There's more money coming in per rent per month than our costs. So it's not like dire straits, but it's really difficult to actual fundamentals of the business, where you're operating at, and really understanding where things are at. So in XP, we actually have an intercompany loan balance sheet, which is basically like a tracker to understand which loans have gone where. I mean, it's a bit like a maze, really. Like, you could give that to a chief chess player and he would struggle to pull it apart. But it's useful to know what's going on where. And in Central Suites, we've been a lot more relaxed. I would say we're almost like, more of a family-run business, not really knowing what's going up or down. It's just consistently trying to get better every day. And recently, I'm struggling to get foresight on the intercompany loans and actually what balance is in between the companies. And realistically, because we have multiple different SPVs and some shared companies, that's really important to understand, because there's cash in your other deals that could actually come back, and you need to be pulling those funds back to respend them. So I've actually spent quite a lot of time with one of my mentees building out a cash flow, and I talked about it a few weeks ago, talking about the strategy that we're putting together for this particular mentee, whether they should look at buy-to-lets or potentially just stick to flips. And without having that clear exposure, it's really, really difficult to operate and grow a business. Operation is actually a lot easier because you can look at your bank balance, but I would say that forecasting growth, reinvesting capital, paying capital down, deleveraging, you can't do it without having really good foresight on your balance sheet. And it's kind of, this is me saying it, I've got one foot in one camp where I have no clarity or substance behind it, and then another foot in another camp where I actually understand where the business is at. And it makes life really difficult, and it pushes you back more in terms of value and profit than the cost of getting someone to put it right. So that's all I wanted to say, really.
Nice. Yeah, and if you want to organize your balance sheet and your P&L in a successful manner via an online platform, go to Xero, use Xero code down below, and get 50% off your first 3 months. Nice, another plug. On to sales at Marlow. For those that are watching, you'll probably guess from the image at the top of the screen that this week sales have been like buses, which is absolutely amazing.
Unreliable?
Not unreliable. They have all come in at the same time. So we've now got every single flat under offer at Marlow, which is, I should have one of those big celebration things, shouldn't I? Or me dancing.
Yeah, where's
or
you
doing...
dancing? I like
There
you.
you go.
There we go.
There you go. There I am. Yeah, super happy. Some of them not at the levels that we really hoped for, but the overall GDV of the site that we are achieving is, let me see, just do a quick calculation of...
I mean, just while you're doing that, I mean, it's pretty crazy that I am hearing so much negativity about the market, resales, resi sales. And there's a phrase actually from around this area. So I live in Henley-on-Thames, which is right next to Marlow. And a lot of developers say around here that in a difficult market, you're still selling Henley and Marlow. And I feel like we're in that difficult market and we're still selling in Marlow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just so to run the calcs. The RICS valuation, so the NGDV that we're going to hit on this site is 11.2% above what the RICS valuation stated. So yeah, super happy with that. We were hoping for more because I think in a good market we probably would have been 20% above where the RICS guide was. So these are just some images of the show flat that was this was a show flat finished actually in January. So we launched in January. We had a massive open. For just a recap on some of the sales process and how it's gone, we had our open day in January, late January. We had over 40 people come and view that day. We had 5 of the 8 under offer within 1 week, all above, as a total, like considerably above asking price for those 5. 1 fell through. So we've now exchanged on the 4 that we got under offer in January. Other big news actually from today about Marlow is that we've had the building control certificates for those 4 that we've exchanged on. So subject to getting our warranty certificates in the next couple of days, we will be completing and serving notice to complete on those 4 flats, which again, massive milestone, like pays down about £1.4 million worth of debt. Huge success for us today with that certificate. So it's taken a while. It's been like pulling teeth, but ultimately we're almost there. So we had the 5 under offer. We lost 1, and it's been really tough actually since then. I think with the turmoil of what was going on in the market, it has been challenging. We've had a couple buyers offer, get accepted, fell through again, through sort of no fault of our own, but they're just a change of circumstances. But yeah, we had 3 offers basically within the same day last Wednesday, for the final 3 that we did have still available. So all at decent levels. One was quite a funny story because the lady and her husband were just walking past on the high street, saw Alex in the little undercroft, said, Alex, obviously they don't know Alex's name, but said to Alex, our builder, can we just pop our head in and have a look? Alex, being the courteous builder that he is, said, yeah, come on in. Showed them the duplex, which is at the other end of the site. Basically, they asked which agency they need to speak to. They strolled down to Savills, walked in through the door, and effectively offered asking price there and then to take it. So hadn't seen it before, hadn't booked in a viewing, just was in the area, wanted to have a nose around, loved it, and put in an offer straight away. So yeah. The reservation fees in, forms have gone out, memorandums of sales have gone across to solicitors, and couldn't be happier really. Obviously we want to get those now pushing forward in the legal process, getting the building control sign off for those remaining 4, and then getting to completion as soon as we possibly can, because although the debt has been reduced massively and we only need sort of 1 more sale of the 8 to clear down all of our debt and pay back some of our investor, until that 5th one is sold, we're still racking up interest from the senior lender. albeit minimal compared to what it is at the moment. So yeah, massive news out of Marlow. I actually had a good afternoon today talking and walking around with our investor partners on this scheme. It's the first time they've seen it completely finished, so they absolutely loved it, and rightly so. The finish is fantastic. Alex has done a great job, yeah, you know, they basically said, as soon as we are out of this one, what can we invest in next and move on to? So yeah, great news. Happy investors, happy us, happy buyers when we finally get these over the line. On to worse news. Did we win the appeal? So for those that have been following the journey of Thame, South Oxfordshire, St Andrew's Court, this is the 20 unit conversion and commercial unit that we are converting. We finished the first 9 units. We've just started on the 11 units, which I talked about earlier, and we've kept the commercial units at the other end. Now, we saw added value with this scheme, you know, the potential for probably £1 million plus in extra gross development value. And that value was coming in the large car park that we own as part of the site. You can see from the screen, we submitted a planning application for a pair of semis, effectively tucked away in the corner of the car park. Looks like what you see on screen, but ultimately it was rejected back in, I think, October last year. So we took it to appeal. Our planning consultant suggested that he thinks we have a pretty good chance of overturning the refusal and getting it approved. But unfortunately, the appeal was dismissed last week. Yeah, not good news, but we already have a new scheme prepped and ready for submission to reduce the massing, take account of the comments from the appeal inspectorate, take account of the planning and heritage officers from the council, scale back the scheme slightly, drop the ridge height, change some of the materiality, reduce the massing, and yeah, we will be resubmitting a new scheme. The appeal was useful because it basically ticked all the boxes from our perspective, other than the impact on the conservation area and listed buildings which are nearby. So as long as we can satisfy the heritage officer that there is less than substantial harm to the conservation area in terms of the design, scale and massing of our new scheme, you know, I'm relatively confident that we will achieve something in that car park, which, yeah, will give, you know, almost £1 million extra GDV to the site and gives us flexibility. You know, we could sell that for just the land and planning. We could build it out ourselves, you know, any of the above. But yeah, bad news. But, you know, we're prepared, ready to go if the news was bad. And that's just the planning process.
I think it's important to share that Thame is still and will be our most profitable deal that we're delivering at the moment, margin wise. So this is just
cream
cherry
on
on the top of the cake, and how we, you know, we're squeezing the value on the site. We're really wringing that tea towel that's, you know, trying to extrapolate all the value that we can. And actual fact, we're still fairly confident that we can, which is why we're resubmitting to resubmit that.
Yeah, I mean, it does say on the title here, how does an appeal work? I think we'll save that for another time, Christine, and maybe we throw that into next week, because obviously, you know, people are probably wondering how that process has been. It's taken 9 months to get to this point. So, and I'm sure there's lots of other people that would like to appeal their refusals on grounds of the council being useless and you know, NIMBYism, for example, or poor committee outcome. So yeah, I can explain what an appeal is at a later date.
Yeah, if that sounds appealing.
If it sounds appealing. And we just have one Q&A to go through anyway, so we've got a couple of minutes. Dilly from last week asked, have you ever used guardians under a license to occupy a commercial property as an interim income generator and property security whilst trying to obtain planning? We haven't done it. We've spoken to, there's a company called Lowe, L-O-W-E, Lowe Guardians, probably one of the bigger players, I think, in London that offer that service. We absolutely would use it, and I think it's a great idea. I've worked on schemes where they have got them in place. Often it is like arty, creative types that basically get very, very cheap subsidized rent in great locations in London to, effectively become your security guards for the site, stop people from breaking in and squatting and causing issues. And ultimately, they get a place to stay for cheap. And it's a great, it's a great way of you getting some income, creating a bit of security on the site, and gives you the opportunity to then go for planning and do what you want to do in the interim. So if you've got a derelict building that you're looking to knock down or repurpose, you've bought it, you don't want it sitting there doing nothing for you. Using guardians like that is a great way of generating some income and creating some security.
Typically, the biggest concern around commercial vacant buildings is actually business rates, because let's say you get 30% of market rent. It's not actually the fact that you're not getting 100% of market rent. It's the fact that you've got probably 40 to 50p in the pound of business rates on that particular property. So rather than being a potential income, it's actually the offset of the overhead that's the beauty.
Yeah, there are creative ways that Low, for example, can minimize or even completely nullify those business rates as well, in terms of who occupies it and how it's structured. So that is a very good point that I didn't mention, that those business rates are severely reduced for you as the owner by bringing in someone like Low Guardians. If you want an intro to Low, let me know and I can make a recommendation. And before we leave, if you tune into this regularly, why haven't you rated us yet? If you haven't, pause this now, rate us on Spotify, leave us a quick 5-star review on Apple. If you feel like 5 stars is the appropriate star to give, which I hope it is, because that's what you tell us it is. You get huge amounts of value from this. We know that. And if you could do us a big favor, and share it with 5 people that you think would get value from this, you would be doing us a massive solid.
I'd also go as far as saying you're not allowed to not score a 5 unless you've asked a question.
Nice.
Can't sit there and give us less than 5 unless you ask a question and then rate our answer.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I was going to say, all in a composer's day's work, eh?
And on that note, we'll leave it there until next week. Have a good weekend, everyone, and catch you later. Bye.
Bye.